It's not buy versus build, it's buy and build upon. That's what we're talking about today on Sounds Profitable with me, Arielle Nissenblatt.
And me, Brian Barletta. Thanks to Magellan AI for sponsoring this article. Did you know that Magellan AI is hiring? Join the Magellan AI team to help brands, agencies, and publishers buy and sell podcast ads more intelligently. Go to magellan.ai for more details. This episode is sponsored by StreamGuys, streaming media solutions for the smartest businesses on the internet. Find out more at streamguys.com.
Brian, Mario, Barletta, what's going on in Barlettaville? That's what I call your house.
Things are good. You know, we got Bridger is 3.5 months. Theo is 3.25 years old. So it's a lot, but it's fun. It's fun. It's starting to cool down in Texas, which means 50 degrees in the morning and like 85 in the afternoon. So no appropriate clothes to wear at any time, but it's good. It's good. We're spending a lot more time outside and we're exploring. What's going on with you?
I'm swell. It is fall time in New York City, and I'm enjoying the weather that is not yet horrible, but is a little bit breezy, but is a little bit warmer than expected because of global warming, which makes me happy, sad, because it's good for me right now, not good for my grandkids. But I'm planning a road trip down to Florida for Thanksgiving, and I'm really excited. So I want your podcast recommendations, mostly history stuff. So if you think of anything, let me know.
Well, my go-to is Lindsey Graham for history stuff.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. So it's going to be hard to beat that. I got a back catalog of his stuff to get through anyways.
I say this all the time in my head, and I want to say it out loud right now. If you ever need to think of a new trailer for your podcast and you need inspiration, his most recent podcast drop is called History Daily, and the trailer is like triumphant. It will make you feel like you're about to take over the world. It is so good.
It's like the workout music of podcasting.
Absolutely.
Is that what it is?
I would run to it.
I love it. I love it. Well, I'm excited when you come back from your trip. I'm excited for you to tell us what you binged so we can get some more recommendations.
Hell yeah. Well, Brian, today is Kevel Day.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite days.
Did you know they used to be called Adtech?
I was wondering where Kevel came from.
Yeah, they changed their name. Yeah, Kevel's new. And you have to go to kevel.co, not kevel.com, because kevel.com is a device that's great for Thanksgiving. It helps you extend your pants, closing your pants, when you can't button them all the way because they don't quite fit.
So Kevel is like a pants product?
Apparently, kevel.com is a product to when the button won't quite close in your pants anymore.
Yes.
Editor's note, kevel.com currently does not exist anymore.
No!
It redirects you to kevel.co.
Oh, they bought it.
They've won the war.
They won the war. Well,
okay.
It's kevel.com and kevel.co day, both of them. And I'm excited to talk about Kevel because this is a product that I have experienced without experiencing it. And then yesterday, when I listened to your interview with James Avery, I learned more about it. And so, Brian, before we jump in, can you tell me what is Kevel?
So Kevel is an ad server. It works in basically any environment that you could need an ad server. It is completely self-standing. And it allows you to focus on the core of what you're building, with the content aspect there, and connect to an ad server that handles the brunt of the load for you, so you don't have to build it yourself. It's a really cool product that I don't think you would ever really need to come across, right? It's a few layers deep for like the surface level for even the Sounds Profitable audience. It's definitely tailored towards the ad tech companies already in the space.
Right. So in your conversation that folks will hear in just a moment, you and James talk about PRX and how they use Kevel for their ad server. And that's just not something that the consumer would ever need to know about, that the podcast consumer would ever need to know about. But you are reaping the benefits of experiencing this without even knowing about it. So that's pretty cool. You're right. It is a few layers deep. Okay, so for the initiated, you know what an ad server is. You're good to go. So earmuffs for the next few seconds or skip ahead. But for the uninitiated, what is an ad server?
An ad server is a piece of technology that allows you to put ads into your content. So that can be in any platform, right? You have the content, you have your website, you have your podcast, you have video, and it's when there is a place for an ad, it makes the requests, It finds the correct ad by using all of the different metrics that can determine which campaign is available, what targeting makes sense, all of that, and provides the right ad back to be placed into the content for the end user to see it and for the campaigns to be run successful.
And you say see it because not only can an ad server be for visual ads, but also for audio ads, right?
I say see it because you're right. It does cover more than just audio ads. Actually, audio ads is a very small subset of what Kevel does because it works across everything. So there are a lot of partners that work with them to handle their video, their native, their display, their podcast or audio, all of it in one central location, which means that smart decisioning engine gets to determine the success of that campaign across all of those mediums if the campaign is measured that way. And yeah, I think I'm still, even with 13 years in ad tech and a majority of it now in podcasting, I still default to seeing an ad or clicking an ad when I get on a roll. I need to get better at that.
That's so funny how you and I differ in that way. I think of ads really just as audio at this point. Yeah, of course, I come across visual ads all the time, but when I think of ads, I'm thinking of podcast ads. I'm thinking of Bombas. I'm thinking of Allbirds. I'm thinking of all that. It's really, really interesting how that works. So, Bryan, why is Kevel's technology uniquely suited towards podcasting and audio?
I think that podcasting has a serious lack of mature ad tech in it, and it's not a knock. A lot of the ad tech that we built has been from the ground up, and the problem there is that we're very siloed off. Each company understands their specific needs and their clients' needs and only builds towards that. They don't build necessarily towards the greater market. They don't build towards the standards of traditional ad tech. Kevel is built to be a silo of ad tech. And so to me, what's attractive is this is the closest thing we have to a titan like Google or someone else coming in here to say, like, this is how a campaign is set up. This is how delivery works. All of those structural things that have existed in display advertising and search and social and video and everything for decades. Kevel is based around that mindset and is closer to traditional ad tech. So that is why I think it's really powerful in podcasting, because it does work in audio, whether streaming or podcasting, and it does take those core mindsets. So it makes it easier for people who know ad tech in general coming into the podcast space to follow the patterns and the templates that are built out for ad tech.
Absolutely. So now that we have had an orientation as to what Kevel is, we'll get into your chat with James Avery in a moment. I want to let listeners know what to expect in your conversation. So this conversation that you're having with James is based off of an article from a few weeks back in Sounds Profitable about buying technology versus building technology. So want to just set up your conversation based off of that?
Yeah. So my whole focus with buying technology versus building technology is really that so many companies are focused on owning tech from the ground up internally. It makes it way more valuable for someone to acquire them, at least in their eyes, and it means that they control the roadmap. But that means sourcing engineers, training engineers, making sure that they have the right subject matter, making sure all the certifications are handled correctly, the maintenance, the infrastructure. It's not a trivial thing. And you can always move towards building something, especially if you rent or you pay for it today. So we go through an example with PRX. We also did a deep dive with Kevel and PRX that's really interesting that you should check out, that PRX got Kevel set up in 7 days. And at any time, PRX could decide to build their own thing if they really wanted to, but there is enough value and the speed to market was important enough that they could focus on additive things that make PRX unique. And spoiler alert for a lot of people out there, there's at least one company, if not two, that I am aware of that were acquired that use other people's technology as the base of their technology and podcast ad tech before they were acquired.
Crazy.
Yeah. And that's why it's all about the service and the connections. It's just a fee. It's a service fee. So whether you're paying a company that is stable and you can trust, or you decide to bring it internally, checks get cut. So I think speed to market is more important, and then figuring out a long-term strategy in that 6 to 18 months afterwards is the right way to go about it.
All right, so let's get to your conversation with James Avery, who is the CEO and founder of Kevel.
James, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
So I love what you're doing with Kevel because it really fits this mentality that I have for ad tech and technology. I have been a product manager for a substantial portion of my career, and it's not easy to build product. So the idea of having a company, which Kevel is, that does third-party or external ad serving that anybody can plug in is such an appealing thing to me, because ad serving is so complex, and any company should, like in podcasting, should really be exploring how they can add ad serving to themselves, to their own platform, whether it's a host, whether it's an agency trying to build something. There's so many different options. But I don't think that the first move should be, well, let's hire some engineers and just build it. So let's dig into buy versus build. You know, you built an entire company around it, right? This is a solo product, right? You only do ad serving. Kevel on its own doesn't do anything unless it's connected to something. So how wild of a ride was that to be like, let's just be an ad server. Let's just be a component that doesn't stand on its own.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, like it goes back to what you were saying. What I find really interesting is people innovating, right? Like people doing something innovative, right? Like the conversations I love is when we have somebody come to us, you know, or I talk to somebody at a conference and they're like, I have this idea, right? I want to do this with ads, right? Like I want to build a new social media type of ad, or I want to do something in audio. Like I want to, you know, think of things differently. And then, so what I want them to do is I want them to focus on the innovation, right? And I don't want them to say, well, the first step is we have to go build an ad server and we have to figure out how to do this at high capacity, low latency, you know, all the pacing and decisioning and targeting and reporting, all these things that just get in the way of doing the part that's innovative. So like, it's funny when we talk about build versus buy, a lot of times we say, well, we're not actually either, because if you come to us, you know, like you're a podcasting company, you know, we're not like something you just buy and say, oh, now I'm done. Right. You're probably going to build a little bit. You're going to build something on top of us. And so it's kind of like, you know, we'll say like build faster, right? Like build or build faster is like the conversation you should have versus like buy or build.
And it's really impressive because PRX uses you guys, and we did a deep dive, and PRX got the ad server up and running in 7 days, which I'm sure they innovated a significant amount down the road, but they were serving ads live in 7 days with it. And you touched on like a really important piece, is that you don't need to rethink pacing. I don't want to relearn pacing on every single ad server. We've already decided how it works in the greater ad tech space. And the sad truth in podcasting is that a lot of podcast ad tech wasn't built by people who have ad tech experience. Right. It was built by smart engineers who understand podcasting. But that's why we have different names for everything, right? Is it a campaign or a line item or a strategy or a creative? Where is tracking? Where does pacing come into play? Creative rotation, all these features that are like no brainers for somebody entering in from a DoubleClick or Google type platform are just, we're trying to reinvent the wheel. And you have that base, like you said, you could plug it in, but you're going to innovate on top of it.
Yeah, exactly. And like, and PRX is a great example. Like, you know, they built on top of our APIs. Like they actually came to us. I don't know if you talked about this in the deep dive. When they originally came to us, they were like, you know, we've dug into your API docs. We think you do everything that we need, except that you don't allow people to upload an MP4 file. And we're like, well, that's pretty easy, right? So we just go in and change it so you can upload a, you know, MP4 or MP3, you know, like MP3 file, or, you know, WAV, like a couple different audio types. And we're like, okay, so we go make a small change to an input field, right? And now they can upload that. And we made it so they could upload something a little bit bigger, right? Because normally for images, your limit's a little bit lower. And they're like, great, like we're live, check this out. Right. So like literally for us, like before this, you know, PRX was our first audio customer years ago. That was the only change we had to make. So the part they did, right, was figuring out, okay, we need to actually like mux this into the download. And they're like, but we know how to do that. Like we're audio people. We're podcast people, right? Like this is easy to us. Whereas they look at what we do and they say, oh, that's totally different. Where for us, it's like, well, it's easy for us to build this, you know, ad serving, pacing, targeting, because that's what we do. But if you ask us, you know, how do we mux this in real time and match the bit rates and do all this stuff? Like we would be, you know, confused and trying to figure out what to do.
But I like that because that siloed approach is really attractive, because if someone uses you in any field right now and they're like, well, I want to get into serving podcast ads, they just can. Like, the ad server works. You build what you want on top of it. You stitch it all together and you make it happen. The ad server is going to be the same across all of it. So you're really enabling people to explore different channels, to build something unique on top of it. And if 10 different customers use Kevel, each output would actually be different, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't have to be. They could just plug it in and do the same thing, but it's how you process data, what data you upload in there, what rules and settings you configure to be your defaults, the UI you build on top of it so your customers can access it from your platform. And that's the stuff that really differentiates companies. We don't need to reinvent everything from scratch every time. We can build on a base layer. And yeah, I haven't really come across a lot of companies like yourself, so I'm such a huge fanboy of it.
I mean, I think it's, the one, somebody we look at a lot is AWS, right? Like, it's kind of, there's a couple of similarities, which is, you can go and use AWS, and it's not just like you're getting just a replacement for if you went and put some servers in a rack, right? And it even sounds crazy to talk about that today, but like, we've been around long enough that like, it used to be like you put servers in racks.
Yep.
But the thing that people don't think a lot about with Amazon is that just by running on Amazon, we get a lot of free improvements, right? Like, there's stuff going on at the kernel level and the OS level and how they're doing virtualization and things to speed up and make it cheaper, right? And so when you also think about, like, we're doing the same thing across a large number of use cases and customers. So when we go make a change to say, oh, you know what, we made pacing 5% more accurate, or we added a new type of targeting, like, that's now just available in the platform for all of our customers. And so it could be a different, a different customer might have said, oh, we have this use case where, we want to figure this out. And we kind of work with them to say, oh, like, here's how we could improve the engine to like handle that. But now PRX just gets that improvement for free, right? They didn't have their engineers go do it. And maybe they don't want to use that improvement. Maybe it's not a good fit, but it's there and it's available to them. So there's this real like scale economy value around, both development and then also like just, where we're deployed and the speed of the servers and all these things that, by using us, they just get these free improvements.
Yeah. When you think of in podcasting, like the technical aspect of it, right? You have the hosting, you have the ad serving, you have the analytics pipelines, you have any other data pipelines that you're working with, you have the UI, and being able to carve out one part and say, hey, let's have a third party handle this fully. That's really impressive. And most of these partners are using third parties to host their files. Like, they're not building data centers. Megaphone, I believe, built a data center for it. And that's a lot, right? Like, yeah. I absolutely remember the CTO sending pictures of like the computers, the racks that he built, because it was the start of COVID and they couldn't get certain hardware. So they're using like gaming computer parts to build these things.
Like,
and it was
they're going to
cool.
They're going to Best Buy to cobble together racks. Yeah. Like, it's just, unless there's like a super compelling reason, like, why would you not use, some cloud company these days? And at some point, sure, maybe it makes sense, right? Like, at some point, Facebook doesn't run on Amazon, right? Or, companies that are in the top, 1%, maybe they need to run their own data centers. But for most people, they don't. And that's kind of the same way we feel about building your own ad server. Like, sure, like Facebook built their own ad server. They should. They're doing, hundreds of billions of dollars through it. But most companies should not be doing that.
Yeah. And I mean, in other versions, like other channels for Adtech, everybody uses DoubleClick Campaign Manager, right? Like, that becomes like a stay on that end. And there's no reason to truly build your own. Podcasting fell into the pattern it has now because there wasn't anything available for us and we just built it. But I like what you're saying about reasons to build it yourself. And it's kind of when it makes sense, right? When it's financially, when you're paying more for it and you need features that are just not being prioritized, or you're not able to do additive work and you're really locked down to only what they have available. DoubleClick won't allow you to build custom stuff on top of it. You take it or leave it. So with you guys, that's neat, right? You can build your own, you can do all that. But for anybody thinking about it, hiring an engineering team is real difficult. First off, you're looking for people with ad tech experience, and those people know what they're worth. And they're not in the podcast industry, which for podcast ad tech, we kind of pay a little bit lower because we're a smaller industry. So the salaries are higher. Now you need product managers and experts on that. And they're getting poached up by industries like CTV, which are exploding right now because the growth there just works, right? And the eyes are there and it's just a bigger audience today. And so if you want to build all that up, it's a lot of overhead for personnel. Then you got to train them on podcasting. Then you got to build something up from scratch. You got to make sure it fits your needs. You got to transition over to it. And then the maintenance, all the certification types, all the security aspects of it. It's
and not to mention, privacy, right? Like we have full-time
I hear
people.
That's important lately.
Yeah. I mean, we have full-time, like multiple people working on understanding privacy laws and security around the world, right? Like it's constantly changing.
How many people do you have on your privacy team?
So it's 2 full-time people right now.
That's way more than most people in
most
podcasting have. Right? Yeah. And you shouldn't need it.
Right. Like it should be some of the stuff that's like handled for you. Right. And then also, I think the other thing to note on like the engineering side, you mentioned like Adtech experience. I can't tell you how many companies we talked to where they tried to build something on their own. Right. And it's engineers who are used to building normal software.
Normal is the right word.
Oh, well, this needs to handle, 20,000 requests a second. Like that's not normal software anymore.
No.
Right. And to make these decisions super fast and and so it's.
Yeah. The output has to hit in 500 milliseconds.
Skill set. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like we have to hit like 50 milliseconds, right? Like,
because then the whole thing has to get stitched back in for the people to send it back out. Yeah. The whole process is less than 500 milliseconds from play to getting back down. That's a lot. Related to how many engineers or how big is Kevel overall and how many engineers do you have?
Yes, we're about like 75 people today. About 30, I think it's like 30 and change is engineering. Like I think if you count all of R&D, like product managers and stuff, it's like close to like 35.
That's awesome, right? That's a level. That's what dedication allows you to do. That would be impossible for even the biggest podcast hosting platform, biggest ad serving platform to really employ specifically for podcasting. I'm sure Spotify overall has way more engineers than that, but dedicated to ad tech, not to analytics, not to hosting, not to the UI of the platform, ad tech. And then to privacy, I think that as you get to these bigger mega corporations, sure they do, but not ad serving privacy, not download privacy.
Right. Well, I can imagine, you could look at Spotify and say, well, sure, they probably have more than 35 people on Adtech. But that's Spotify, which you could combine the market cap of like every other audio company in the world, and it doesn't add up to Spotify, right? And so it's like, that is like, Spotify is probably that like the Facebook of audio, right? Like they are
That's valid.
Right? Like they're the ones that are big enough, they should build it themselves. And there's also potential that they're going to ruin it all. So it's very much like Facebook.
So don't hold back. No, but it's a good point. That's a great distinction because we're so afraid of like missed opportunity. And what I like about this is that at any point, somebody who plugs in a third-party solution like this could just go, yeah, that check I'm cutting you is just too much. I'm going to build it myself. And they can just do that. Right. Yep. Whereas if you go the other way around, like you're firing people. Like if you try and build your own ad server and then you switch to a third party solution, like you can't keep paying for all those people.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just like you just look at the trend across the industry, right? Like we see like startups being built on like no code solutions. And people are like, well, that's not going to scale. And they're like, that's not the point. Like the hard part is figuring out like, will people pay for this? Like, can we
people use it?
Right? Like, when people use it, and then we can go figure it out. So, I mean, there's definitely cases where somebody builds something on us, and then later decides, oh, we need to go build this ourselves. But it's pretty few and far between, right? Yeah. Because like we're pretty flexible. We can scale, and people realize like, well, if I'm going to hire 5 or 6 engineers to do something, I'd rather hire them to do X because that's going to make me a lot more money versus hiring them to recreate something they already have, right?
Yeah. What advice would you give to ad tech companies in this space who are getting pressure from their investors or their board to get more diverse than what they're really keenly focused on? Like, me and you have talked so many times. There's like, just throw in a little hosting and there you go. You're competitive in this space. And you completely told me, no, we just don't need to, right? Anybody can partner with us. It can be up that quickly. That's not what we focus on.
Well, and I will say we might one day, right? Like I can see it as something that, maybe it's an opportunity. Like I think that like the audio space is just fascinating because it is moving so quick, and so many companies are getting bought up by other companies, and it feels like there's not really good independent options out there, right? Like with Spotify and iHeart and all these companies have kind of bought up all the major players. So there could one day be an opportunity where we go a little bit further into audio. But I keep hoping somebody else will do it, right? I keep hoping somebody else will come along and say, oh, we've built a great hosting platform. We've hooked in Kevel's APIs to allow, podcast creators to put in their own advertising, but then also access some, maybe some programmatic ads and things like that. Like I think there's a market for that. And we're hoping somebody else will go build it. But if we lose our patience, maybe we'll see if we can get you over here to build it for us. Say we have all these attribution companies who are doing great. We have all these creative solution companies or market intelligence companies, and I'm so proud of the work they've done. Like I really get to say that as someone who's really enjoys this space and looks at it. But the amount of times I talk to them and they're just like, well, what about this thing that's definitely not in our core competency that people kind of want? What would your advice be to them? Because I'm sure you've been challenged with that before, especially with getting funding and everything. Like people want you to do more. Yeah. To us, it's all like you have to figure out the opportunity cost, right? Like it's like we have, I think we could put work into, specifically going deeper into audio. But we could also right now there's projects that we know will improve ad serving across all of our customers.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's what ends up winning when we have these tough prioritization conversations. Cause it's always there's, we could sit here for a hour talking about all the things I'd love to do. But then the challenge is you always only have so much money and time. And so it's figuring out what is the thing that's going to benefit the most of our customers and help us continue to serve, work with people doing anything, right? Like whether it's people who serve ads in cars or billboards or, just about anything out there. And so if we can do things that make everything easier for all of them or better for all of them, that whole market, that tends to win out over the things that are focused on one market.
Do you do do you poll your current customers for something like that? Or do you do your salespeople get you feedback?
Our customers love to tell us, right? They love to tell us what they'd like to see and change. And then I think, and we have a great sales team who's talking to people, companies all over the world, and we get, great feedback from them as well of what's their biggest problem? How can we help them solve that challenge?
That's awesome. Not an easy thing to do. I don't blame anybody for chasing things that might not be in their wheelhouse. I think it's always good to be adventurous. I mean, half the companies wouldn't exist if people weren't adventurous in this space, but it is okay to just say that you do one thing and you do it well and you're the best at it.
Well, and it's kind of what we preach, right? Because we go talk to a company like PRX and we say, you guys, these are the things you do amazingly well, right? So don't become an ad server. Work with us, right? So then I don't want to go the other way and say, oh, PRX, we're going to try to do what you do, because I have no clue how to do what PRX does, right? They do very different things than us. And so I think it's a great way to do business and work in the ecosystem. Being a platform, people can build on us and can prosper without having to build what we build.
Definitely a great point of view. So I'd like to end things off with asking you what podcast you're currently listening to.
The podcast I probably listen to the most right now is Acquired.
Yeah.
So Acquired's a great podcast. I got a chance to meet one of the hosts when I was out in San Francisco recently at a meetup. And I think I've actually just finished listening to every episode. I did every episode and then every LP episode. I'm kind of a completist when it comes to podcasts. So I'm actually in the market for a new one to start going all the way through. So I got to decide what's next.
Me and you actually met through their Slack channel.
Yeah.
I super forgot about that. Wow, it's been a while, but it's a really great show, and I'll see if I can get you some recommendations or something similar.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian.
Well, Brian, I'm a fangirl of the fact that you called yourself a fanboy of Kevel.
Well, I'm glad that you liked it. I mean, I think that I'm in a unique position in what I do. It sounds profitable that like this is my own thing. I've end sponsorship agreements. I've turned down product deep dives because I didn't believe in the products. And there are so many cool pieces of technology that I get to just talk about and I get to encourage people to check out. And some of them will stick. Kevel is absolutely not something for everybody, but I think that if you are interested in building ad tech, you should evaluate a conversation with someone like Kevel because they might be able to solve enough of your problems that you can focus on what makes you unique instead of reinventing the wheel. So definitely a huge fanboy of what they're doing there.
Yeah, and I think my big takeaway from your conversation is that it's kind of like what I said up at the top of this episode. It's not necessarily buy versus build. It's buy and build upon. You know, if you need to get something up and running right away, great. Buy what already exists. People who have been in the game for a while have made something for the purpose of helping you. And usually they create that with enough flexibility for you to add in your own spice as a company and add in what makes sense for you and your employees and in order to make your product run smoothly. So yeah, I'm a big fan of buying and not reinventing the wheel.
The build upon thing is so perfect because that's it. I mean, it doesn't even have to be more tech. It can just be service, right? What makes you unique? You can absolutely get the same thing and then customize it, right? Me and you could have the exact same tech stack and it's, do you want to talk to Bryan or Arielle, right? Whose website is better? Whose reports output are better? Whose strategy on how to use the tool is better? That's the build upon, and that's so smart. I'm so glad that you got that out of it.
Me too, and I hope other folks do as well. One more question that I have for you is that James mentioned that Kevel, he kind of mentioned this in passing, might think of adding some more capabilities to their technology. So first I'd like to ask you, he mentioned hosting. He mentioned potentially moving into the hosting space. What do you think of that? And then more generally, what do you think of companies that have really succeeded at one aspect of things, taking on more?
I think that it's an interesting angle, right? Because they're the only third-party ad tech company I know for ad serving. And that's really powerful. And I think hosting is commoditized. It's very easy. Anybody can do it. James Cridland self-hosts, and I think that that's a really important thing to think about, right? It's not that difficult. What becomes difficult is the certifications. IAB certification. In other tech spaces, there's MRC certification. I think that if Kevel decided to get into it, it would be easier for them to build out hosting than it would for any other partner to organically build their own ad serving. And so I think it would be really cool to see. I do think hosting's become a competitive market, but I think the differentiation here would be, it would be a compelling ad server for people who are used to traditional ad servers or who are looking to make the same ad server across different media types. So that could be kind of neat. They're doing well with just the ad server part. I think they don't have a lot of competition there, but they don't have unlimited clients. With podcasting, if you have hosting and you can upgrade people to do ad serving or things like that, there's always room for a monthly fee for hosting. There's always room to handle ads on their behalf and take a cut of that. So that's always the allure. I'm constantly impressed by the fact that they've stuck to their guns. I wouldn't be super disappointed if they expanded into it as long as they still focused on the ad server, but it's definitely hard. It is very, very easy to make margin on subscription services.
Yeah, and I'm always impressed by companies that say, nope, we're not taking on any more into our larger product capabilities. We are sticking with what we are doing because we know we do it well, and that's what you're going to use us for. And we're not moving on from there because we are successful where we are. And I think that is okay. And I think too many people in technology, too many people in the podcast space, I think that they need to build from scratch, and you don't. You need to buy and build upon.
I'm right there with you on that. Before we wrap up, here's what's happening this week in the world of podcasting with James Cridland at Podnews. This episode is sponsored by Simplecast, the first and last word in podcast management and analytics. Find out more at simplecast.com.
If you want to connect or have any questions or comments for us, feel free to reach out on social media. At SoundsProfNews, at Brian Barletta, or at Ari This and That on Twitter, podcast@soundsprofitable.com for email, or you can reach out to us via the Yappa link in the show's description.
This show is recorded with Squadcast, which provides all the remote recording services that we need at Sounds Profitable, from video and audio, and it even has Dolby mastering features. I'm a huge fan of it for the product deep dives and our podcast, so I recommend that you go to squadcast.fm for a free trial. If you haven't already, check out the private feed on Supercast to access narrated articles, early drops of interview episodes, and Sounds Profitable en Espanol. Check out the link in the episode description.
Thank you to Terra and Ian Powell for their help on this episode.